The October sun painted the Tennessee mountains in golden hues as Reba McEntire adjusted her rearview mirror and let out a deep sigh. It was a Friday afternoon, and she was driving alone on Interstate 40, something that had become increasingly rare in her decades-long career. The familiar weight of solitude pressed against her chest as she navigated through the winding roads that had been the backdrop of so many of her songs. Her black Cadillac Escalade hummed quietly on the asphalt, the only sound breaking the silence being the soft country melody playing from her stereo. She had deliberately chosen to drive herself today, turning down her manager's insistence on hiring a driver. Sometimes, she needed these moments of normalcy, these stolen hours where she could just be Reba, not the Grammy-winning artist, not the television star, not the business mogul, just a woman from Oklahoma trying to make sense of her world. The call had come 3 days earlier, on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. She was reviewing contracts in her Nashville office when her assistant, Patricia Williams, knocked on the door with an expression that immediately set off alarm bells in Reba's mind. Patricia had been with her for 15 years, and Reba had learned to read every subtle shift in her demeanor. "Reba, there's a call for you," Patricia had said, her voice unusually gentle. "It's from Cedar Grove Memorial Hospital in Cookeville." The words that followed seemed to echo in slow motion. "Miss McEntire, I'm calling about Sarah Beth Johnson. She's listed you as her emergency contact. I'm afraid she's been in a serious automobile accident." Sarah Beth Johnson. The name alone was enough to transport Reba back 25 years to a small honky-tonk bar in East Nashville, where a teenage girl with platinum blonde hair and dreams bigger than the state of Tennessee used to sing backup vocals for local bands. Sarah Beth had been one of those hopeful young artists who gravitated toward Reba in the early days, seeking mentorship and friendship from someone who had successfully navigated the treacherous waters of the country music industry. Their relationship had been complicated, layered with the complexities that often arise when personal and professional boundaries blur. Sarah Beth had been talented, incredibly talented, with a voice that could make angels weep and a stage presence that commanded attention. But she had also been fragile, susceptible to the darker temptations that lurked in the shadows of Nashville's glittering facade. Reba had tried to guide her, to protect her, to be the mentor she herself had never had. But success in the music industry requires a specific type of resilience. And despite all her talent, Sarah Beth had struggled with the pressures, the rejections, and the constant uncertainty that defined an artist's journey. Their friendship had weathered storms that would have destroyed weaker bonds, but it had also been tested by misunderstandings, missed opportunities, and the inevitable growing pains that come with two strong-willed women trying to find their place in a male-dominated industry. The last time they had spoken was 6 months ago. A brief phone call where Sarah Beth had mentioned she was working as a music teacher at an elementary school in Cookeville, about 2 hours east of Nashville. She had sounded different then, calmer, more at peace with her life choices. She talked about her students with genuine warmth, about how teaching music to children had given her a sense of purpose she had never found in the pursuit of stardom. "I finally understand what you used to tell me about music being bigger than fame," Sarah Beth had said during that conversation. "These kids, they remind me why I fell in love with singing in the first place." Now, as Reba drove through the rolling hills of Middle Tennessee, those words echoed in her mind with painful clarity. The hospital staff had been professional but grim in their assessment. Sarah Beth was alive, but barely. The accident had been severe. A head-on collision with a drunk driver on Highway 111 just outside Cookeville. She was in intensive care, and the doctors weren't optimistic about her chances of recovery. What made the situation even more heartbreaking was the discovery that Sarah Beth had no immediate family. Her parents had died years earlier, and she had never married or had children. The emergency contact form in her purse contained only two names: her principal at Cookville Elementary School and Reba McEntire. The weight of that responsibility settled heavily on Reba's shoulders as she pressed the accelerator and watched the speedometer climb past 75 miles per hour. She needed to get to the hospital, needed to be there for Sarah Beth in whatever capacity she could. The irony wasn't lost on her that someone she hadn't spoken to in months had still considered her important enough to list as emergency contact. The countryside blurred past her windows as memories flooded back unbidden. She remembered the first time she had heard Sarah Beth sing, at the Bluebird Cafe during an open mic night in 1998. The young woman had stepped up to the microphone wearing a thrift store dress and cowboy boots that had seen better days. But when she opened her mouth to sing, the entire room had fallen silent. She had performed "Crazy" by Patsy Cline, and her interpretation had been so raw, so emotionally authentic, that several people in the audience had been moved to tears. After her performance, Sarah Beth had approached Reba's table with the mixture of confidence and vulnerability that characterized so many young artists in Nashville. "Miss McEntire," she had said, extending a slightly trembling hand, "I know you probably hear this a lot, but I'd give anything for the chance to learn from you." There had been something in her eyes that night, a hunger and determination that reminded Reba of herself at that age. Against her better judgment, she had given Sarah Beth her business card and told her to call the next week. That decision had led to years of collaboration, friendship, heartbreak, and ultimately, a complicated relationship that defied easy categorization. As the miles passed beneath her wheels, Reba found herself thinking about the choices that had brought them both to this moment. She thought about the phone calls at 3 in the morning, when Sarah Beth was struggling with depression, the times she had lent money for rent when gigs were scarce, the heated arguments about artistic integrity versus commercial success. She thought about the day Sarah Beth had finally admitted that her dream of country music stardom was slowly killing her spirit, and how Reba had both mourned and celebrated that revelation. The GPS on her dashboard indicated she still had 45 minutes until she reached Cedar Grove Memorial Hospital. The afternoon was beginning to fade into evening, and she could see storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The weather forecast had predicted rain, and already she could feel the atmospheric pressure changing, that peculiar heaviness that preceded autumn storms in Tennessee. Her phone buzzed with an incoming text message, but she ignored it. This drive, this time alone with her thoughts, felt necessary. Too often, her life was filled with noise, meetings, recording sessions, phone calls, obligations that pulled her in a dozen different directions simultaneously. But right now, in the quiet cabin of her SUV, she could process the gravity of the situation without distraction. The truth was, she felt guilty. Guilty that she hadn't reached out more frequently. Guilty that she had let their friendship drift into sporadic phone calls and holiday cards. Life had a way of creating distance even between people who cared deeply about each other, and she wondered if she could have made a difference if she had been more present in Sarah Beth's life. But she also knew that relationships, especially ones forged in the intense crucible of the music industry, were complicated beasts. Sometimes caring about someone meant giving them space to find their own path, even if that path led away from the dreams they had originally shared. Sarah Beth's decision to leave Nashville and become a teacher had been the right one for her, even if it meant their lives had diverged in ways that made regular contact difficult. As she crested a hill and saw the sprawling suburbs of Cookville in the distance, Reba felt a familiar tightness in her chest. She had performed in front of millions of people, had weathered personal tragedies and professional setbacks that would have broken lesser spirits. But the prospect of sitting beside a friend's hospital bed while machines monitored her vital signs felt overwhelming in its intimacy. The exit sign for Cedar Grove Memorial Hospital appeared ahead, and she signaled to move into the right lane. Whatever waited for her in that hospital room, whatever difficult conversations and painful decisions lay ahead, she would face them with the same strength that had carried her through 4 decades in the music industry. Sarah Beth had been there for her in ways both big and small over the years, and now it was her turn to return that loyalty. The parking lot of the hospital was busier than she had expected for a Friday evening. She found a space near the back, away from the main entrance, and sat for a moment collecting herself before stepping out into the increasingly cool air. The storm was definitely approaching. She could smell rain on the wind and hear the distant rumble of thunder. As she walked toward the hospital entrance, her phone rang. The caller ID showed her manager's name, but she let it go to voicemail. Whatever crisis or opportunity awaited her attention could wait. Right now, the only thing that mattered was being present for someone who had once meant the world to her, and who, despite the passage of time and the inevitable changes that life brings, still held a significant place in her heart. The automatic doors of Cedar Grove Memorial Hospital slid open with a soft whoosh, and Reba stepped inside, leaving the approaching storm behind her. She had no way of knowing that her journey to this hospital would intersect with another person's story in ways that would change both their lives forever, or that a simple drive through the Tennessee countryside would become the prelude to one of the most emotionally significant encounters of her career. Officer Marcus Thompson adjusted his uniform collar as he prepared for another routine evening shift on Interstate 40. The Tennessee Highway Patrol badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights of the precinct locker room, a symbol he had worn with pride for 12 years. At 38, Marcus had seen enough highway incidents to fill several lifetimes, but he approached each shift with the same dedication and professionalism that had earned him commendations from his superiors and respect from his colleagues. The briefing room was filled with the familiar sounds of officers preparing for duty. Radio checks, equipment inspections, and the casual banter that helped ease the transition from civilian life to the heightened awareness required for law enforcement. Captain Jennifer Reynolds stood at the front of the room, reviewing the evening's priorities with her characteristic efficiency. "We've got reports of increased traffic volume heading toward Knoxville," she announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 20 years in law enforcement. "Construction delays on Highway 111 are pushing more vehicles onto the interstate. I want extra patrols between mile markers 280 and 300. Thompson, Anderson, I'm assigning you to that stretch." Marcus nodded, making notes on his assignment sheet. The section of I-40 between Nashville and Knoxville was known for its challenging curves and varying elevation changes, factors that contributed to a higher-than-average accident rate. During his years on the highway patrol, he had responded to everything from minor fender benders to tragic multi-vehicle collisions that left families shattered and communities mourning. What most people didn't understand about highway patrol work was the psychological toll it took on officers. Every call could be routine or life-changing, and there was no way to predict which category any given situation would fall into. Marcus had learned to compartmentalize his emotions, to maintain professional composure in the face of human tragedy. But there were cases that stayed with him long after his shift ended. His partner for the evening, Officer Rebecca Anderson, was a 5-year veteran of the Highway Patrol with a reputation for thoroughness and compassion. She approached law enforcement with the same meticulous attention to detail that had made her a successful military police officer during her 8 years in the Army. Her deployment to Afghanistan had given her a perspective on human nature and crisis management that translated well to civilian law enforcement. "Ready for another exciting night of traffic stops and paperwork?" Rebecca asked, with the dry humor that helped officers cope with the more mundane aspects of their job. "Always," Marcus replied, checking his equipment one final time. His duty belt held the standard array of tools: service weapon, radio, handcuffs, flashlight, first aid kit, and citation book. Each item had been positioned according to muscle memory developed over years of practice, ensuring he could access whatever he needed quickly and efficiently. As they walked to their patrol vehicles, Marcus felt the weight of personal concerns that had been troubling him for weeks. His 15-year-old daughter, Emma Thompson, had been struggling with depression following the death of her mother 2 years earlier. The grief counselor had warned him that adolescent grief could manifest in unpredictable ways, but knowing that intellectually didn't make it any easier to watch his daughter withdraw from activities she had once enjoyed. Emma had inherited her mother's love of music, spending hours in her bedroom playing guitar and writing songs that she refused to let him hear. Lisa Thompson had been a music teacher at the local middle school, and her sudden death from cancer had left both Marcus and Emma struggling to find their footing in a world that suddenly felt unstable and uncertain. Before her illness, Lisa had filled their home with music: piano lessons for Emma, impromptu singing sessions during car rides, and evening concerts where she would perform whatever song Emma requested. The silence that had settled over their house since her death was profound and heartbreaking, broken only by the muffled sounds of Emma's guitar filtering through her closed bedroom door. Marcus had tried everything he could think of to help his daughter process her grief. He had taken her to counseling sessions, enrolled her in support groups for teenagers dealing with loss, even attempted to engage her in conversations about her mother's memory. But Emma had become increasingly isolated. Her grades had started slipping, and her friends had gradually stopped calling. The guilt he felt about his inability to help his daughter was compounded by the demands of his job. Highway patrol officers worked irregular hours, and the nature of the work meant that he was often called away during moments when Emma might have been ready to open up. He had requested a shift change to spend more time at home, but budget constraints and staffing shortages had made that impossible. His radio crackled to life as he settled into the driver's seat of his patrol car. Unit 247. Respond to mile marker 287 for routine traffic monitoring. Unit 247. Copy. Marcus responded, starting the engine and pulling out of the precinct parking lot. The late afternoon sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the highway. This was typically one of the busier times for traffic violations, as commuters hurried to reach their destinations and tourists pushed to make up time lost to construction delays. As he merged onto Interstate 40, Marcus found his thoughts returning to Emma. The previous evening had been particularly difficult. She had missed dinner again, claiming she wasn't hungry. And when he had knocked on her bedroom door to check on her, she had simply said she wanted to be alone. The sound of her crying had been barely audible through the door, but it had cut through him like a blade. His radio interrupted his thoughts. All units, be advised of possible severe weather moving through the area between 6 and 8 p.m. Expect reduced visibility and hazardous road conditions. Marcus glanced at the sky and saw the storm clouds that had been building throughout the afternoon. October weather in Tennessee was notoriously unpredictable, and he had learned to take weather advisories seriously. Rain on autumn leaves created treacherous driving conditions, and the combination of reduced visibility and wet roads often led to an increase in accidents. He positioned his patrol car at mile marker 289, a location that provided good visibility of traffic in both directions while remaining safely off the main travel lanes. This was the methodical, patient work that comprised the majority of highway patrol duty. Monitoring traffic patterns, watching for dangerous driving behaviors, and maintaining a visible presence that encouraged drivers to exercise caution. The first hour of his shift passed without incident. He issued 2 citations for speeding. Both drivers had been courteous and understanding when he explained that the construction zones required reduced speeds for the safety of work crews. These were the interactions he preferred, where education took precedence over punishment, and drivers seemed genuinely willing to modify their behavior. As the afternoon progressed into early evening, the traffic volume increased noticeably. Marcus observed the familiar patterns that highway officers learned to recognize. The clustering of vehicles around slower-moving trucks, the aggressive lane changes of drivers running late for appointments, the tourist vehicles with out-of-state plates that were clearly unfamiliar with the local road conditions. His radio buzzed with a message from Officer Anderson, who was patrolling a section of highway about 10 miles east of his position. Unit 248 to Unit 247. I've got a minor fender bender at mile marker 298. No injuries, but I'll be tied up for probably 30 minutes with paperwork. Copy that. 248. I'll extend my coverage area accordingly. This was another aspect of highway patrol work that required constant adaptation, adjusting patrol patterns based on real-time developments, ensuring that adequate coverage was maintained even when officers were dealing with specific incidents. Marcus had developed an intuitive sense for reading traffic flows and identifying areas that might require additional attention. At 5:47 p.m., his radar unit detected a vehicle traveling 78 miles per hour in a 70 miles per hour zone. Under normal circumstances, he might have let it slide. 8 miles over the speed limit wasn't egregious, and the driver appeared to be maintaining safe following distance and lane discipline. But the approaching storm and increased traffic volume made him decide to initiate a stop, partly for safety reasons and partly to remind drivers to exercise extra caution given the weather conditions. The vehicle was a black Cadillac Escalade with Tennessee plates, traveling eastbound in the right lane. As he activated his emergency lights and moved into position behind the SUV, Marcus ran the license plate through the system as a matter of routine procedure. The registration came back clean, no outstanding warrants, no red flags in the database. The driver responded appropriately to his lights, signaling and moving onto the shoulder in a controlled manner. Marcus could see through the rear window that there appeared to be only one occupant, a woman who seemed to be reaching for what he assumed were her license and registration documents. He approached the driver's side window with his standard professional demeanor, mentally preparing for what he expected to be a routine traffic stop. The window rolled down as he reached the vehicle, and he found himself looking at a woman with auburn hair and tired eyes who seemed vaguely familiar, though he couldn't immediately place where he might have seen her before. "Good evening, ma'am. I'm Officer Thompson with the Tennessee Highway Patrol. I stopped you because I clocked you doing 78 in a 70 zone. May I see your license and registration, please?" The woman handed him the requested documents without argument, her hands steady, despite what appeared to be emotional fatigue. As Marcus glanced at the driver's license, the name Reba McEntire registered with the same delayed recognition that sometimes occurred when he encountered celebrities in everyday situations. For a moment, he simply stared at the license, processing the disconnect between the famous name and the very human woman sitting in the car before him. Reba McEntire, the country music legend, the actress, the cultural icon, was just another driver on his highway, dealing with what appeared to be a personal crisis that had nothing to do with her celebrity status. "Miss McEntire," he said, his voice maintaining its professional tone despite his internal surprise, "I need to ask if you're okay. You seem distressed, and I want to make sure you're in a condition to drive safely." It was a question he might have asked any driver who appeared to be dealing with emotional stress, but as he spoke the words, he noticed the way her composure seemed to crack slightly around the edges. There was something in her expression, a vulnerability that transcended fame and success, that reminded him of the look he had seen too often in Emma's eyes over the past 2 years. Reba looked up at the officer standing beside her window, and for a moment, the carefully constructed walls she had built around her emotions over the past few days began to crumble. There was something in his voice, a gentleness that went beyond professional courtesy, that caught her completely off guard. She had been stopped by police officers before, usually due to her driving getting a bit aggressive when she was upset or distracted. But this felt different. Officer Thompson's badge read M. Thompson, and he appeared to be in his late 30s with kind eyes and the bearing of someone who had seen enough of life's difficulties to recognize genuine distress when he encountered it. His question about whether she was okay had been asked with what seemed like sincere concern rather than the routine inquiry she might have expected. She began, then stopped herself. The truth was complicated, and she wasn't sure how to explain that she was rushing to a hospital to see a friend who might be dying. Someone who had been both a blessing and a source of heartache in her life for over 2 decades. "I'm sorry about the speed. I'm trying to get to Cedar Grove Memorial Hospital. A friend of mine is in intensive care." Marcus felt a familiar tightness in his chest at the mention of the hospital. Cedar Grove Memorial was where Lisa had spent her final weeks, where he had held vigil beside her bed, while doctors delivered increasingly grim prognoses. The smell of disinfectant and the sound of monitoring equipment had become permanently etched in his memory, associated with the most difficult period of his life. "I understand that's stressful," he said, his professional demeanor softening slightly. "But I need you to understand that driving while emotionally distressed can be just as dangerous as driving under the influence. The weather's getting worse, and there's been increased accident activity on this stretch of highway today." Reba nodded, recognizing the wisdom in his words, even as part of her wanted to argue that every minute counted, that Sarah Beth might not have much time left. She had been gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles had gone white, and she realized that her emotional state might indeed be compromising her ability to drive safely. "You're right," she admitted. "I've been pushing pretty hard to get there, and I know that's not smart. It's just..." Her voice trailed off as she struggled to find words for the complex mixture of guilt, fear, and love that was driving her urgency. Marcus found himself in an unusual situation. Standard procedure would be to issue the citation and send her on her way, perhaps with a warning about driving safely given the weather conditions. But something about this encounter felt different, more significant than a routine traffic stop. Maybe it was the mention of the hospital where his wife had died. Or maybe it was the recognition that even celebrities, especially celebrities, could be dealing with the same fundamental human struggles that affected everyone. "Miss McEntire," he said, making a decision that went against his usual by-the-book approach, "I'm going to give you a warning instead of a citation. But I want you to promise me you'll slow down and drive carefully. That friend of yours isn't going to benefit from you becoming another patient in that hospital." The kindness in his voice was too much for Reba's already fragile emotional state. Tears that she had been holding back for 3 days finally began to flow, and she found herself unable to speak. The officer's simple expression of concern, coming from a complete stranger who had no reason to care about her personal struggles, had broken through defenses that she hadn't even realized she was maintaining. Marcus watched as one of the most successful women in country music history broke down crying in front of him, and he felt the same protective instinct that he experienced whenever he encountered someone in crisis. This was the part of law enforcement that didn't make it into training manuals. The human moments that required empathy and judgment, rather than strict adherence to procedure. "Ma'am, why don't you take a minute to collect yourself?" he suggested gently. "There's a rest area about 2 miles ahead. Maybe you should pull over there and get yourself centered before continuing to the hospital." Through her tears, Reba managed to nod. She knew he was right. knew that arriving at the hospital in an emotional meltdown wouldn't help Sarah Beth or anyone else. But the simple act of crying in front of this stranger felt simultaneously embarrassing and liberating. When was the last time she had allowed herself to be vulnerable with someone who didn't have a vested interest in her career or personal life? "I'm sorry," she said, wiping her eyes with a tissue from her purse. "This isn't like me. I don't usually fall apart in front of police officers." "In my experience," Marcus replied, "people don't usually fall apart unless they have good reason to, and there's nothing to apologize for. We're all human." As he spoke, Marcus found himself thinking about Emma, about the way she had been struggling to cope with her grief, about his own feelings of helplessness in the face of his daughter's pain. There was something about this unexpected encounter that felt like more than coincidence, though he couldn't have articulated exactly what that something was. "Can I ask you something?" Reba said suddenly, looking up at him with eyes that were still bright with tears. "Do you have children?" The question caught Marcus off guard. Personal conversations weren't typically part of traffic stops, but this entire encounter had moved well beyond typical boundaries. "I do," he answered honestly. "A 15-year-old daughter. And do you ever feel like you're failing them, even when you're trying to do everything right?" The question hit him like a physical blow. Here was this successful, accomplished woman, articulating the exact fear that kept him awake at night. The worry that despite all his efforts, he wasn't enough, couldn't provide what Emma needed to heal from her mother's death. "Every day," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, they sat in silence. A country music legend and a highway patrol officer, two strangers who had discovered an unexpected common ground in their shared struggles with love, loss, and the challenge of caring for people who were important to them. The radio on Marcus's shoulder crackled with a routine communication from dispatch, reminding both of them that this was still, technically, a traffic stop. But something had shifted in the dynamic between them, something that transformed a routine encounter into a moment of genuine human connection. "Officer Thompson," Reba said, reading his name badge. "What's your daughter's name?" "Emma," he replied, wondering why he was sharing personal information with someone he had just met, but somehow feeling that this conversation was important in ways he couldn't fully understand. "Emma's a beautiful name," Reba said softly. "What does she love to do?" Marcus felt his chest tighten as he thought about his daughter. She used to love music. Her mother was a music teacher, and Emma inherited her talent. But since Lisa died 2 years ago, Emma's withdrawn from everything. She still plays guitar, but she won't let me hear her anymore. She won't talk to me about music, about her mother, about anything, really. As the words left his mouth, Marcus realized he had just shared more personal information with this stranger than he had with most of his colleagues, friends, or even family members. There was something about the moment, about the raw emotion they had both displayed, that seemed to create a space where normal social barriers didn't apply. Reba felt her heart break a little more as she listened to Officer Thompson describe his daughter's struggle. The parallels to her own relationship with Sarah Beth, the way music could both connect and isolate people, the difficulty of maintaining relationships in the face of grief and disappointment, were striking and painful. "Music has a way of carrying us through the hardest times," she said quietly, "but sometimes it also reminds us of what we've lost." Emma probably associates music with her mother, which makes it both comforting and heartbreaking. Marcus nodded, recognizing the truth in her observation. He had noticed that Emma seemed to avoid the songs that Lisa had loved most, while gravitating toward music that her mother had never heard. It was as if she was trying to create a musical space that belonged only to her, separate from the memories that might be too painful to bear. "I don't know how to help her," he confessed. "I've tried everything I can think of, but nothing seems to reach her. Sometimes I wonder if she'd be better off with my sister or my parents, people who might be better equipped to understand what she needs. Don't you dare think that, Reba said with sudden intensity. That girl needs her father, needs someone who loves her unconditionally and won't give up on her. Trust me, I've seen too many young people who didn't have that kind of support system, and the difference it makes is profound. As she spoke, Reba was thinking about Sarah Beth, about all the ways she had tried and sometimes failed to provide the guidance and support that a young artist needed. The music industry was filled with talented people who had struggled because they lacked the emotional foundation that came from having someone believe in them consistently. Someone who would be there regardless of professional success or failure. The friend you're going to see at the hospital, Marcus said intuitively, she's someone who means a lot to you. Reba nodded, fresh tears threatening to fall. Her name is Sarah Beth Johnson. I've known her for 25 years. She's incredibly talented, but she struggled with the pressures of trying to make it in Nashville. Eventually, she left music and became an elementary school teacher. She was finally happy, finally at peace with her life. And now, she couldn't finish the sentence. But Marcus understood. He had seen enough tragedy to recognize the particular kind of pain that came from watching someone you cared about suffer, especially when that suffering seemed random and unfair. She's lucky to have someone who cares enough to drop everything and drive 2 hours to be with her, he said. That kind of loyalty isn't common. I should have been a better friend, Reba replied. I should have stayed in touch more, should have made more effort to be part of her life after she left Nashville. Now, I'm afraid it might be too late to tell her how much she meant to me, how proud I am of the choices she made. Marcus felt a familiar ache in his chest, the same regret he carried about things he hadn't said to Lisa before her illness, conversations they hadn't had, moments of connection he had postponed because he assumed there would always be more time. It's never too late, he said firmly. Even if she can't respond, even if she's unconscious, she can probably still hear you. You can still tell her everything you want her to know. As he spoke, Marcus realized he was offering advice that he hadn't fully followed himself. There were things about Lisa that he had never shared with Emma, stories and memories that might help his daughter understand how much her mother had loved her, how proud she had been of Emma's musical talent. The storm that had been threatening all afternoon was beginning to arrive in earnest. Large raindrops splattered against the windshield of Reba's SUV, and the wind was picking up noticeably. Marcus glanced at the darkening sky and made another decision that went against standard procedure. "Miss McEntire," he said, "I think you should follow me to the rest area and wait out the worst of this storm before continuing to the hospital. The roads are going to be dangerous for the next hour or so, and you're in no condition to be driving in hazardous weather." Part of Reba wanted to protest, wanted to insist that she needed to get to the hospital as quickly as possible. But the rational part of her mind recognized that Officer Thompson was right. She was emotionally compromised. The weather was deteriorating rapidly, and risking an accident would help no one. "Okay," she agreed reluctantly. "But, will you?" She paused, not sure exactly what she was asking for, but knowing that this conversation had provided something she needed. A moment of genuine human connection. A reminder that she wasn't alone in struggling with difficult emotions. "I'll stay with you until the weather clears," Marcus said, understanding her unspoken request. "My shift partner can cover this section of highway for a while." As they prepared to move to the rest area, both Marcus and Reba sensed that this encounter was becoming something more significant than either of them had expected. They were no longer just a police officer and a speeding driver, but two people who had found an unexpected opportunity to support each other through difficult moments in their lives. The rest area was nearly deserted when Marcus led Reba's SUV into the parking lot. The approaching storm had driven most travelers off the road, leaving only a few long-haul truckers who were settling in to wait out the weather. Marcus parked his patrol car near the covered pavilion and gestured for Reba to pull up beside him. The rain was falling steadily now, drumming against the roof of the pavilion with increasing intensity. Lightning flickered in the distance, followed by the low rumble of thunder that seemed to echo the emotional turbulence both of them were feeling. They sat in their respective vehicles for a moment, each processing the unexpected turn this encounter had taken. Marcus radioed his dispatcher to report his location and status, explaining that he was providing assistance to a motorist during severe weather conditions. It wasn't entirely untrue, though it didn't capture the complexity of what was actually happening. He then sent a quick text message to Officer Anderson, letting her know he would be delayed in resuming his patrol duties. Reba sat in her SUV, staring out at the rain and trying to make sense of what had just occurred. In her 40-plus years in the music industry, she had encountered thousands of people, fans, fellow musicians, industry executives, journalists, but she couldn't remember the last time a conversation with a stranger had affected her so deeply. There was something about Officer Thompson's quiet strength and genuine compassion that had reached past her professional defenses and touched the part of her that was simply a woman dealing with fear and regret. After a few minutes, Marcus approached her vehicle and tapped gently on the window. "Would you like to sit under the pavilion?" he asked when she rolled down the window. "It might be more comfortable than staying in the car, and we can keep an eye on the weather." Reba nodded and grabbed her purse, following him to one of the picnic tables under the covered area. The pavilion provided protection from the rain, while still allowing them to see the storm's progress across the Tennessee landscape. The sound of rain on the metal roof was soothing in a way that surprised her, creating a cocoon of relative privacy despite being in a public space. They sat across from each other at the picnic table, and for several minutes neither spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that allowed for processing, for gathering thoughts that had been scattered by unexpected emotion. "I keep thinking about what you said," Reba finally said, her voice barely audible above the rain. "About it never being too late to say what needs to be said. I've been carrying around so much guilt about Sarah Beth, about choices I made and didn't make, things I said and didn't say." Marcus leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped on the table. "What kind of guilt?" "The kind that comes from being human, I suppose," Reba replied with a sad smile. 25 years ago, when Sarah Beth first came to Nashville, she had this incredible talent, but also this fragility. She needed someone to believe in her, to guide her, but she also needed someone to protect her from the darker aspects of the music industry. I tried to be both, but I don't think I was very good at either. She paused, watching lightning illuminate the storm clouds. There was this one night, maybe 15 years ago, when Sarah Beth called me at 2 in the morning. She had been drinking, which wasn't unusual for her during that period, and she was crying about a record deal that had fallen through. She said she felt like a failure, like she was never going to make it in Nashville. Marcus waited patiently as Reba gathered her thoughts, recognizing the importance of allowing people to tell their stories in their own time and way. "I was tired," Reba continued, "and frustrated because we had been through similar conversations so many times before. Instead of really listening to what she was trying to tell me, I gave her what I thought was tough love. I told her that if she wanted to succeed in music, she needed to stop feeling sorry for herself and start making better choices. I told her that talent without discipline and professionalism wouldn't get her anywhere." "That doesn't sound unreasonable," Marcus observed gently. "Maybe not," Reba agreed. "But it wasn't what she needed to hear in that moment. What I didn't understand then was that she wasn't really calling about the record deal. She was calling because she was drowning emotionally and spiritually, and she needed someone to throw her a lifeline, not a lecture about personal responsibility. Marcus felt a familiar pang of recognition. How many times had he responded to Emma's emotional struggles with practical advice, when what she really needed was simply to be heard and understood? After that conversation, Reba went on, something changed between us. Sarah Beth started pulling away, started calling less frequently. She went through a really dark period, drinking more, making poor decisions about relationships and career choices. I kept thinking that she needed to hit bottom before she could bounce back, that my job was to let her experience the consequences of her actions. But you were dealing with your own career pressures too, Marcus pointed out. You couldn't be responsible for saving everyone who came to you for help. Reba looked at him with appreciation for his attempt to absolve her of guilt, but she shook her head. The thing is, I could have been more present. I could have made more effort to understand what she was really going through. Instead, I let my frustration with her choices create distance between us, and that distance became a habit. By the time she finally got her life together and left Nashville to become a teacher, we had settled into this pattern of surface-level communication. Holiday cards, occasional phone calls where we talked about everything except what really mattered. Marcus understood the regret she was describing because he was living with a similar version of it. With Emma, he said slowly, I keep thinking that if I were a better father, if I knew the right things to say or do, I could somehow make her grief process easier. But the truth is, I don't know how to help someone heal from losing their mother because I'm still trying to figure out how to heal from losing my wife. The vulnerability in his admission seemed to create even deeper intimacy between them. They were strangers, but they were sharing the kind of fears and doubts that people usually reserved for their closest friends or therapists. How long were you and Lisa married? Reba asked. 18 years, Marcus replied, his voice thick with emotion. We met in college, got married right after graduation. She was studying music education, and I was in criminal justice. Everyone said we were too young, that we should wait until we were more established in our careers. But we knew we wanted to build a life together. He pulled out his phone and showed Reba a photo. A family picture taken at what appeared to be a school concert. Lisa Thompson was a petite woman with warm eyes and a radiant smile, sitting at a piano with Emma beside her, both of them looking happy and carefree. She was beautiful, Reba said softly, and Emma looks just like her. Everyone says that, Marcus agreed. Sometimes I think that's part of Emma's struggle. Every time she looks in the mirror, she sees her mother, and I think it makes the loss feel fresh again. What kind of music did Lisa teach? Everything, Marcus replied, his face lighting up despite his sadness. Classical piano, but also contemporary stuff, show tunes, even some country music. She believed that music education should expose kids to as many different genres as possible. She used to say that music was a universal language, and her job was to help kids become fluent in it. Reba felt her heart ache as she listened to Marcus describe his wife. There was such love in his voice, such genuine admiration for the woman Lisa had been. It reminded her of the way she had felt about music in the early days of her career, before the industry had complicated her relationship with the art form she had initially loved with pure, uncomplicated passion. Emma must have inherited some of that passion, she observed. She did, Marcus confirmed. Before Lisa got sick, Emma was always singing, always playing piano or guitar. She wrote songs, performed in school concerts, talked about maybe studying music in college. Music was how she and Lisa connected. They would spend hours together at the piano, working on pieces, or just playing around with melodies. But now, Marcus sighed deeply. Now music seems to cause her pain instead of joy. She still plays, but only when she thinks I can't hear her. And the songs she plays are sad, minor key pieces that break my heart. It's like she's using music to process her grief, but she won't let me be part of that process. Maybe she's protecting you, Reba suggested. Maybe she knows that hearing her play her mother's songs would be painful for you too, so she's trying to spare you that pain. The possibility hadn't occurred to Marcus, but it made sense. Emma had always been sensitive to other people's emotions, often more concerned about how her actions affected others than about her own needs and desires. I've been so focused on trying to help her move past her grief, he admitted, that I haven't really considered that she might be trying to protect me from mine. Grief isn't something you move past, Reba said, with the wisdom of someone who had experienced significant loss. It's something you carry with you and learn to integrate into your life. Emma's relationship with music is probably evolving to accommodate her new reality as someone who has lost her mother. That doesn't mean she's lost her love for music permanently. It just means she's figuring out how to love music in a world where her mother isn't physically present to share that love. As she spoke, Reba realized she was articulating something she hadn't fully understood about her own relationship with Sarah Beth. The guilt and regret she carried weren't really about their friendship failing. They were about her difficulty accepting that relationships, like people, evolve and change over time. Sarah Beth's decision to leave Nashville and become a teacher wasn't a rejection of their friendship. It was her way of finding a sustainable relationship with music that didn't depend on external validation or commercial success. "You know what's strange?" Marcus said, interrupting her thoughts. "Emma has never heard your music, as far as I know. But Lisa was a big fan. She had several of your albums, and she used to play your songs when she was cooking or grading papers. After she died, I put all her music away because it was too painful to hear. But maybe," he trailed off. But Reba understood what he was thinking. Maybe Emma needs to know that her mother loved music in all its forms, including country music. Maybe sharing that part of Lisa's musical taste would help Emma understand that loving music doesn't mean betraying her grief. The storm was beginning to show signs of letting up. The rain was still falling, but less intensely, and the intervals between lightning flashes and thunderclaps were getting longer. Both Marcus and Reba noticed the change in weather, but neither seemed eager to end their conversation. "Can I tell you something?" Reba said suddenly. "This conversation, talking with you about Emma and Lisa and Sarah Beth, it's helping me understand things I couldn't figure out on my own. I came into this day feeling like I had failed as a friend, like I had somehow let Sarah Beth down by not being more present in her life. But maybe the real failure would be not showing up now, when she needs someone to sit with her and remind her that she's loved." Marcus nodded, recognizing the shift in Reba's perspective. "And maybe my real failure would be continuing to avoid conversations with Emma about her mother, because I'm afraid of making her sadness worse. Maybe what she needs is to know that it's okay to miss her mother and love music at the same time." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, each processing the insights that had emerged from their unexpected encounter. The rain continued to fall, but more gently now, and the worst of the storm seemed to be moving east toward the mountains. "Officer Thompson," Reba said finally. "Marcus, can I ask you for a favor?" "Of course. When you go home tonight, will you knock on Emma's door and ask her to play something for you? Not because you want to fix her grief or make her feel better, but because you want to share in something that's important to her?" Marcus felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety at the thought. "What if she says no?" "Then you respect that," Reba replied. "But you also let her know that the invitation remains open whenever she's ready. Sometimes the most important thing we can do for someone is simply let them know we're available to listen." "And will you promise me something in return?" Marcus asked. "What's that?" "When you get to the hospital, will you tell Sarah Beth everything you wish you had said during all those years when you thought you had more time? Even if she can't respond, even if it's scary or emotionally difficult." Urtusandru. Reba felt tears threatening again. But they were different tears now. Less about regret and more about gratitude for this unexpected moment of connection and clarity. "I promise," she said. The rain had slowed to a light drizzle, and the sky was beginning to brighten slightly as the storm clouds moved away. Marcus checked his watch and realized they had been talking for nearly an hour, far longer than any traffic stop in his career, but somehow exactly as long as this conversation needed to be. "I should let you get back on the road," he said reluctantly, "and I need to resume my patrol." "Yes," Reba agreed, though she made no immediate move to get up from the picnic table. "Marcus, I want you to know that this conversation, this time we've spent together, it's meant more to me than you probably realize. I came into this day feeling isolated and overwhelmed, and somehow talking with you has reminded me that we're all connected by the same fundamental experiences of love and loss and hope." Marcus stood up and extended his hand to help Reba up from the picnic table. "The feeling is mutual," he said sincerely. "I've been struggling with how to be a better father to Emma, and talking with you has given me some ideas about approaching that differently." As they walked back toward their vehicles, both of them felt the weight of returning to their original purposes: Reba's drive to the hospital, Marcus's patrol duties. But something fundamental had shifted during their conversation under the pavilion. They were both carrying the same burdens they had arrived with, but those burdens felt more manageable somehow, less isolating. "Before you go," Marcus said as Reba reached for her car door handle, "I want to give you something." He went to his patrol car and returned with a small card. "This is my business card, but I'm writing my personal cell phone number on the back. I know we're strangers, and this might seem weird, but I'd like to know how things go at the hospital. And if you ever need someone to talk to who understands what it's like to worry about people you care about." Reba took the card and smiled, the first genuine smile she had managed in days. "Thank you," she said. "And I want you to know that if things go well with Emma, if she does decide to share her music with you, I'd love to hear about it. Sometimes the best thing about good news is having someone to share it with." They stood there for a moment, two people who had started the day as complete strangers and were ending this encounter as something approaching friends. The connection they had forged was unlikely and unexpected, but it felt real and valuable to both of them. "Drive safely," Marcus said as Reba got into her SUV. "And remember what you promised me." "I will," she replied. "And you remember what you promised me too." As Marcus watched Reba's taillights disappear into the distance, heading toward Cedar Grove Memorial Hospital and whatever awaited her there, he felt something he hadn't experienced in the 2 years since Lisa's death. A sense of hope about his ability to connect with Emma in meaningful ways. The conversation with Reba had reminded him that love didn't require perfect knowledge or flawless execution. It simply required showing up with genuine care and remaining open to whatever response that care might generate. The parking lot of Cedar Grove Memorial Hospital was quieter now that the storm had passed. Reba sat in her SUV for a moment before going inside, thinking about everything Officer Thompson, Marcus, had shared with her. The conversation at the rest area had shifted something fundamental in her perspective, transforming her anxiety and guilt into something more like purposeful resolve. She walked through the automatic doors and approached the information desk, where a kind-faced woman in her 60s looked up with the practiced compassion of someone who spent her days helping worried family members and friends navigate one of the most stressful environments imaginable. "I'm here to see Sarah Beth Johnson," Reba said. She's in intensive care. Are you family? The volunteer asked gently. I'm listed as her emergency contact, Reba replied, producing identification when requested. The volunteer consulted her computer and then provided directions to the ICU on the third floor. As Reba waited for the elevator, she found herself thinking about Marcus's advice about telling Sarah Beth everything she wished she had said over the years. The prospect was both terrifying and liberating. The intensive care unit was a world unto itself. Hushed conversations, the constant background hum of monitoring equipment, and the particular tension that existed in spaces where life and death decisions were made daily. The nurse at the ICU desk was a professional woman in her 40s, who introduced herself as Jennifer Martinez. Miss Johnson has been unconscious since the accident, Nurse Martinez explained as she led Reba down the hallway. Her injuries are severe: traumatic brain injury, internal bleeding, multiple fractures. The doctors have stabilized her condition, but the next 24 hours will be critical. They stopped outside room 314, and through the window, Reba could see Sarah Beth connected to various machines, her face pale and swollen from her injuries. It was shocking to see someone she remembered as vibrant and full of life, looking so fragile and vulnerable. "Can she hear me if I talk to her?" Reba asked. "We believe that unconscious patients can often hear familiar voices," the nurse replied. "Many families find that talking to their loved ones provides comfort for both the patient and the visitor. You're welcome to stay as long as you'd like." Reba entered the room and pulled a chair close to Sarah Beth's bedside. For several minutes, she simply sat there, adjusting to the reality of seeing her friend in such a condition. The monitoring equipment provided a steady rhythm of beeps and electronic sounds that somehow felt both reassuring and ominous. "Hey, Sarah Beth," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here. I'm so sorry it took me this long to get here, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." She reached out and gently took Sarah Beth's hand, careful not to disturb the IV lines and monitoring equipment. The hand felt warm, which was comforting, but there was no response to her touch. "I've been thinking about you a lot during the drive here," Reba continued, settling into the one-sided conversation. "Thinking about all the times we shared, all the music we made together, all the dreams we chased. I know I wasn't always the best friend to you, especially during those years when you were struggling with everything Nashville threw at you." She paused, collecting her thoughts and drawing strength from the promise she had made to Marcus. "I want you to know that I'm proud of you, Sarah Beth. So incredibly proud of the choice you made to leave Nashville and become a teacher. It took courage to admit that the music industry wasn't where you belonged, and even more courage to find a way to stay connected to music that felt authentic and sustainable for you." The words came easier now, as if speaking them aloud was helping her understand truths she hadn't fully recognized before. "I used to think that your leaving Nashville was somehow a failure, that I had failed as a mentor because I couldn't help you make it as a recording artist. But I was wrong about that. You didn't fail. You succeeded in finding your own path, your own way of making music matter in the world." Reba found herself thinking about Marcus and Emma, about the conversation they had shared about grief and music and the complexity of human relationships. "I met someone today," she told Sarah Beth. "A police officer who stopped me for speeding on my way here. His name is Marcus, and he has a 15-year-old daughter who's struggling with grief. His wife died 2 years ago, and his daughter has withdrawn from music because it reminds her too much of her mother." She squeezed Sarah Beth's hand gently. "Talking with Marcus reminded me that love doesn't always look the way we expect it to. His daughter is protecting herself and her father from painful memories by keeping her music private, but she's still making music because she needs it to process her emotions. In some ways, that's what you did when you left Nashville. You found a way to keep music in your life without letting it cause you pain. The afternoon sunlight filtering through the hospital room window was beginning to fade into evening. Reba had been sitting beside Sarah Beth's bed for over 2 hours, sometimes talking, sometimes simply holding her hand in comfortable silence. The one-sided conversation had become a form of meditation, allowing her to process years of complicated emotions and arrive at a clearer understanding of their relationship. "I want to tell you about some of your students," she said, remembering the stories Sarah Beth had shared during their last phone conversation. "During our last call, you talked about how much you loved teaching music to elementary school kids. You said they reminded you why you fell in love with singing in the first place, how their enthusiasm and lack of self-consciousness helped you reconnect with the pure joy of making music." Reba's voice grew stronger as she continued. "That's a beautiful legacy, Sarah Beth. You've spent the last 6 years helping children discover the same magic in music that brought us together all those years ago. You've probably influenced hundreds of kids, given them something that will stay with them for the rest of their lives. That's not a smaller accomplishment than making it in Nashville. It's a different kind of success, maybe even a more important one." As she spoke, Reba realized she was articulating something she had never fully appreciated about different ways of making a meaningful contribution to the world. The music industry tended to measure success in terms of commercial achievement, record sales, chart positions, award nominations, but Sarah Beth had found a way to measure success in terms of human impact, in terms of the joy and confidence she helped instill in young people who were just beginning to discover their own creative potential. "I wish I had told you all of this when you were conscious to hear it," she continued. "I wish I had been better at staying in touch, better at understanding what you needed from our friendship. But I'm telling you now, and I hope somehow you can hear me." Just then, Nurse Martinez appeared in the doorway. "Miss McEntire, I wanted to let you know that we've seen some positive changes in Sarah Beth's vital signs over the past hour. Her blood pressure has stabilized, and her brain activity is showing some encouraging patterns. We're cautiously optimistic." Reba felt a surge of hope mixed with relief. "Does that mean she might wake up?" "It's too early to make predictions," the nurse replied carefully. "But these are definitely positive developments. Sometimes the presence of loved ones can have a measurable impact on a patient's condition. Your being here, talking to her, might be helping more than you realize." After the nurse left, Reba turned back to Sarah Beth with renewed energy. "Did you hear that? You're fighting, and I'm so glad. I have so much more I want to say to you. So many conversations I want us to have when you're ready." She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found Marcus's number. On impulse, she sent him a text message. "At the hospital. Sarah Beth is stable, showing some positive signs. Thank you for the conversation today. I hope things go well with Emma tonight." Almost immediately, her phone buzzed with a response. "So glad to hear positive news. Currently sitting outside Emma's bedroom door, working up the courage to knock. Your conversation helped me realize some important things." Reba smiled, feeling connected to this man she had met under such unusual circumstances. Their brief encounter had somehow provided both of them with the perspective and encouragement they needed to approach their respective challenges with renewed hope and clarity. "Sarah Beth," she said, turning back to her friend, "I want to make you a promise. When you wake up, and I believe you will wake up, I'm going to do a better job of being present in your life. Not as someone trying to guide your career or solve your problems, but as a friend who values you for exactly who you are." She paused, thinking about the ways their relationship could evolve going forward. "I'd love to come visit your school sometime. Maybe meet some of your students. I'd love to hear about the songs you've been teaching them, the ways you've been sharing your love of music with the next generation." And if you're interested, maybe we could collaborate on some educational music projects. Songs designed specifically for children who are just learning to love music. The idea excited Reba as she spoke about it. She had never considered focusing her creative energy on educational music, but the possibility of working with Sarah Beth to create something meaningful for young learners felt like a perfect way to combine their different experiences and perspectives. We could create music that teaches kids about emotions, about resilience, about finding their own voices, she continued, her enthusiasm growing. You understand child development and age-appropriate teaching methods, and I understand songcraft and recording production. Together, we could make something really special. As evening settled over the hospital, Reba realized she had been talking almost continuously for several hours, sharing memories, expressing regrets, articulating hopes for the future, and simply being present with her friend in whatever way she could. The process had been emotionally exhausting, but also deeply healing, allowing her to transform years of guilt and distance into something more like acceptance and love. Her phone buzzed with another message from Marcus. Update: Emma let me into her room. She played one of her mother's favorite songs. We both cried, but it was good crying. Thank you for encouraging me to take that step. Reba felt tears of joy as she read his message. She quickly typed back, "That's wonderful." Music has a way of helping us connect with people we love, even when they're not physically with us. I'm so happy for both of you. His response came quickly. How are things with Sarah Beth? Stable and showing some positive signs, she typed. I've been talking to her for hours, telling her everything I should have said years ago. It's been difficult, but also healing. I think she can hear me. I'm sure she can, Marcus replied. And I'm sure it means everything to her to have you there. As Reba put her phone away, she felt a profound sense of gratitude for the unexpected connections that had emerged from what had started as one of the most difficult days in recent memory. Her encounter with Marcus had reminded her that strangers could become allies in the most unlikely circumstances, that sharing vulnerability could create bonds that transcended normal social boundaries. Sarah Beth, she said softly, I want you to know that today, on my way to see you, I met someone who reminded me about the importance of showing up for people we care about. His name is Marcus, and he's a good man who's trying to figure out how to help his daughter process grief through music. Talking with him helped me understand that love doesn't require perfect timing or flawless execution. It just requires presence and authenticity. She squeezed Sarah Beth's hand again, noticing that it seemed to squeeze back slightly, though it might have been her imagination. So, I'm here, and I'm being as present and authentic as I know how to be. I'm telling you that I love you, that I'm proud of you, that I believe in your recovery, and that I'm committed to being a better friend going forward. The monitoring equipment continued its steady rhythm, and the evening shift nurses made their quiet rounds. But Reba remained focused on her vigil beside Sarah Beth's bed. She had nowhere else she needed to be. Nothing more important to do than simply be present with someone who had meant so much to her over the years. Tomorrow, she said, I'm going to call your principal and find out more about your students, about the music program you've been building at the school. I want to understand the life you've created for yourself, the impact you've been making. And when you're ready, when you've recovered enough, I'd love to visit your classroom, maybe sing with your students, show them that the woman who has been teaching them about music is connected to a larger world of musicians who respect and admire her. As the night deepened, Reba felt a sense of peace settling over her. The guilt and regret that had driven her frantic journey to the hospital had been transformed through conversation, both with Marcus and with Sarah Beth, into something more like acceptance and hope. She couldn't change the past, couldn't undo years of missed opportunities for deeper connection, but she could be fully present in this moment and committed to being more present in whatever moments lay ahead. Her phone showed several missed calls from her manager and assistant, undoubtedly wondering where she was and whether she needed anything. But those calls could wait until tomorrow. Tonight, the only thing that mattered was keeping vigil with a friend, offering whatever comfort and support her presence could provide, and holding space for healing and hope. Outside the hospital window, the lights of Cookville twinkled in the darkness, and somewhere in those lights was an elementary school where Sarah Beth had been building a different kind of musical legacy, one student at a time. And somewhere along Interstate 40, Marcus was probably having a long overdue conversation with his daughter about music and memory and the complex ways that love persists even in the face of loss. Reba settled back in her chair, maintaining her gentle hold on Sarah Beth's hand, and prepared to maintain her vigil for as long as necessary. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight was about presence, about showing up fully for someone who had always deserved better friendship than she had received, and about honoring the unexpected connections that could emerge even from the most difficult circumstances. "Rest easy, Sarah Beth," she whispered. "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Take all the time you need to heal. When you're ready, I'll be here to listen to whatever you want to tell me about the life you've built, the students you've taught, and the dreams you want to pursue next. We have so much catching up to do, and this time, I promise to be the friend you deserve." The night settled around them, filled with the quiet sounds of healing and hope, connection and commitment, and the profound peace that comes from finally saying the things that most need to be said.